let's make the assumption that we're talking about people who have bought in to doing this, but there are no formal structures. So let's think about what their typical process might look like in terms of effort if you're trying to implement a certain amount of diligence. And so we're going to take a look at the report request process. So if I'm a report writer, and I'm getting asked to build a new report, what's the effort that I have to go through to do diligence without, a formalized data governance process in place, right? So first of all, it's going to start with sort of a manualized, decentralized request process, right? So maybe, again, some of you might have some of these things as you sort of approach some formal processes. Maybe you guys don't have any, but we're going to talk about someone who has none to kind of illustrate all the issues here. So the first is maybe I get an email or I get a phone call from someone saying, hey, Brian, can you, create this report that has, this sort of set of people on it with these, this values and these calculations and all of that, and I need it by next Friday or whatever. And I said, okay, great. Now, I'm going to then take that request and sort of start a process of figuring out how to, if I believe that, I want to make sure that what I'm going to build is right for what that requester is asking for. So I'm going to go through the process of building out my own little documentation to send back to them saying, this is what I think you want from a requirement standpoint. This is how I plan to design it. Does this look right to you? So the first thing I'm doing is coming up with my own system of documenting this. So there's already a pretty high level of effort there that didn't exist by having sort of a predefined template or expectations or processes for documenting reports requirements, or a form for that. All right, so now I'm going to start working on this. The next thing I want to do is to say, well, is there already a report that does this or does something similar? So I need to go search for that. If I don't have a simple like a report catalog area to go search for, that can be a challenge. Or maybe the issue is that there's multiple reporting tools with different levels of access, and I don't even know, I might not have access to all of those tools to find that. So there's a barrier there in that searching. The second is, all right, so now I'm going to try to research into what I think is the appropriate data system for this and to see what data is available and what logic is already there. In order to do that, I may have to, if I don't already have it, I may have to request access to that system so I can get in there and look at the metadata, right? So I can understand what tables exist or what stuff is already there. Then if I did get access, I can figure this out, and maybe I find another report I can build on, and maybe I don't, and I've built this document. Then I'm going to iterate with that requester to confirm that I have the right requirements as I go. So there's sort of the effort that I'm doing to try to get that diligence done up front. Again, the other alternative is all right, I'm just going to assume I know what they want, and I'm going to guess where it is, and I'm going to start writing something on my own. All right, now let's say as part of that, the requester has asked for something in a, like a functional definition. Maybe they want to know how we are rating the anticipated retirement date for an employee or something. And I don't know HR data very well. I've never had a request for that. And I'm trying to figure out, what does this mean, right? So to try to define what that, the requester doesn't know and I don't know, and there's not a glossary or something or a place I can look for, I need to determine that business definition for that requested term that they're asking for, business term. So first thing I have to figure out, who's the right person to ask? Well, who is the person who could tell me how we calculate or where we store anticipated retirement date, or even if we have that somewhere, right? So I get to figure that person out. Once I figure that person out, and maybe I'll send them a request and ask for a response, and I'm sort of waiting for a response from them. Right? Maybe I'll get a response from them that says, oh, that's a great question. I actually do have a way that I calculate that, but you know what? There's like 4 other ways that's being calculated, and I'm not sure mine's the right way, or that can you figure out which one they're looking for, or you're really opening a hornet's nest there. And I might have to go try to get consensus for figure out which one it is, and then at some point I might just give up and go with whatever I have or whatever the first answer is, or whatever, or go back to the person and say that. So that can be a long, drawn out process on its own. Now, unfortunately, I think for a lot of people who aren't dedicated to the diligence of this, they're going to potentially just go with, the first thing they can think of or whatever, and if they're at least doing some diligence, to tell them this is how I'm calculating it and hope it's what they wanted. Once I figured out the next thing is to do, I'm going to sort of build a report, which may include a step where I need to request access to the data and tools to develop. If I'm a report writer, that's probably not a big leap there, but that is a step that can be benefit from having a formal process to do. And then when it's done, letting the requester know it's ready. So, getting back to them, remember this came in informally over a phone or email. So I can send them back an email or whatever and say, this is what it is. But how am I including the documentation? And how am I sort of tracking that they're going to look at it and sign off on it and it's really done? And some of these things can last forever. So, any of you who've ever done any kind of development without having sort of a good sign-off process or tracking, system for this kind of stuff knows that it can be kind of a forever task to close anything out associated with these informal processes. Lastly, okay, so I did my effort up front. I've documented this. I've gotten some things defined. I've created, a good requirements document. I've created some technical documentation on what this thing is. Now I want to figure out how, if anyone else ever wants to look at this, where, how I can document this. And if you don't have sort of formal processes like that, the most common thing that'll happen is just going to get lost to the ether. But there, so there might be some effort to look at that. So even if they did all that work, they might take a few minutes to try to figure out where to store it. But without a repository, it's a wasted effort. Now let's go flash ahead. It's 2 months later. Someone comes in, a different developer gets a similar request for a similar report, and they start back at the beginning. And one of the first things they're going to do, if you recall here, is that they're going to search for existing reports or answers to questions, and they're not going to be able to find that. And they're going to go through all of this work again without knowing what was there. Or even if they do find an existing report, are they going to be able to find the documentation or even know who built it? So there's a whole bunch of effort that's going on here that keep running into barriers and burdens and extra time to do this, for someone who's dedicated to trying to get that diligence done. So, we want to think about how you can, if you have good data governance business processes, you will make the ability to deliver data with good diligence and management much more efficient, right? So we're never going to beat, in terms of time to delivery, someone who doesn't care about doing diligence or doesn't care if the data is correct or if anyone ever wants to look at what they did again. They're always going to beat us in terms of effort, right? But hopefully you're not trying to do that, because if you're looking at sort of effort and return, you have the total effort over time of designing something, developing it, supporting it, maintaining it, whether or not it can be applied for reuse in other ways, right? That's the total effort over time. And as I just said, if someone's doing something without any care, they can get through the design and development relatively quickly. Now, they may multiply on the back end the support and maintenance and reuse issues, but they're going to get to that pretty quickly. And then in terms of the return from that effort, if I've got a pretty mission critical report or other deliverable, there can be a lot of value from that. Did it really quickly, got a lot of value. But as you know, with that, you have to take out from that the kind of not only the back end support, maintenance, and reuse, but the risk and accuracy or the lack of trust, that maybe no one's really going to use it unless they really understand it. Or again, like the lack of ability to reuse it can greatly diminish this value. If someone says, this is great, but I have, I want to do it one other way, and the person who originally developed isn't there anymore, it's going to be hard. I always say that a good report or a good, piece of data or information that you're providing for someone will often produce more questions and answers, right? Because they're going to get this information and say, oh, that's really useful. I would like to know more about that, or that opens up other questions I have. And if your deliverable doesn't have the ability to deal with those add-on questions quickly and accurately, it's going to diminish the value. So, in this case, you kind of get what you pay for, right?